Howdy, y'all! I don't have a physical copy to show off this time, because this doesn't deserve to have a permanent residence on my DVD shelf. Simply put, an action film has to have at least a decent, coherent story to get the audience from one set piece to another. It doesn't matter how good the action actually is, because if it doesn't have a good story to back it up, it's not going to be worth a watch. I have seen several films that have failed in this regard, but The Beekeeper honestly takes the cake for a movie that has good action, but doesn't have a decent plot to support it. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's go over the film opens up on a house in the countryside. Jason Statham's character, Adam Clay, is seen removing some hornets from a shed. And then we have a scene with him talking with his neighbor, Mrs. Parker. Through their talk, we found out that Clay has been living with her for some time, renovating her land.
This place was crabgrass and weeds, and you brought it back to life.
Clay goes back to his shed to kill the hornets, and then he makes his way to his beehives to start making a fresh batch of honey. Mrs. Parker goes back inside, only to be greeted with a phony message on her computer. Unfortunately for her, after making a call to the scam center, all of her funds are stolen from her accounts, leading to her reacting appropriately. Clay comes back later that night to see Mrs. Parker's deceased body, only to quickly be arrested by her daughter, who happens to be a member of the FBI. Agent Parker is harsh to Clay at first, assuming that he killed her mother, so she has him send him for questioning. During that time, she finds out about the scam that had occurred. Clay, after being cleared of the crime, returns back to his shed, after which he has a nice chat with Agent Parker.
There's some British Isles hiding in your accent.
Who talks like this? During their conversation, she tells him about the scam that her mother had fallen victim to. Clay, after making a call to some organization that the audience isn't privy to yet, gets the address of the call center that tricked Mrs. Parker. He makes a small visit there where he blows up the building, knocking down anyone who comes in his way. The boss of the call center calls his boss, Derek Danforth. After being told what happened, Danforth tells them to go through their latest customers in an attempt to find Adam Clay. Agent Parker is called over to the scene of the exploded call center to investigate what happened, where she discovers that the place was one of the many centers under United Data Group, the organization that scammed her mother. During their investigation, the boss and his crew locate Adam Clay back at Mrs. Parker's property. They track him back down to his house and gun down all of his bees. Oh, they would have been stung to ribbons. They continue down to the shed, only for Clay to kill them all one by one, leaving only the boss alive. The agents are then called over to Mrs. Parker's property because Clay's shed is now a smoldering pile of ashes. They quickly discover all of the dead bodies inside of the barn, finding the badge of United Data Group on one of the corpses. This is where they first make the connection that Adam Clay may be linked to all the mayhem. The boss of the call center, now severely injured, calls up Derek Danforth to tell him the situation. He's interrupted by Clay, however, and has his phone taken away from him in a rather violent manner. Clay has a little chat with Derek, assuring the man that he's coming after him. Derek's powerful friend, Jeremy Irons, steps into the situation. Irons very naturally telling the audience what his backstory is.
I did 35 years of loyal government service, director of the world's premier intelligence agency.
He assures Derek that a beekeeper is nothing to sneeze at, and he starts to call in some reinforcements to hopefully save Derek's skin. He then has a small chat with Danforth's mother, assuring her that everything will be okay. During Irons' talk with the current director of the CIA, we find out that Adam Clay is a retired member of a secret organization known as the Beekeepers. Oh, that's why this film is called that. Anyway, the current active Beekeeper is called in to take down Adam Clay. To little success. Adam Clay, after quickly disposing of her, rides off to one of the Beekeeper's hidden bases to get the location of the next call center up the totem pole. Irons enlists the help of some SEALs to hopefully save the center, during which he reveals to him, and the audience too for that matter, the true nature of the Beekeepers. An organization totally separate from the rest of the government, whose sole goal is to, quote-unquote, protect the hive. As that happens, Agent Parker and her partner correctly assume that Clay is about to attack the next center. They have a meeting with the deputy director of the FBI, where they let it slip that they believe Clay is a member of a secret organization known as the Beekeepers. After that, they're able to easily call on a team of agents to hopefully save the call center as well. The FBI agents and Iron SEAL team arrive at the call center at the same time, and unfortunately for everyone, Clay arrives just a little bit later. He swiftly takes everyone down and interrogates the boss of the center, trying to find out who the main boss is. After some questioning, he finds out that the main boss is Derek Danforth, and after he escapes the building, the audience properly learns that Mrs. Danforth is none other than the president, making Derek an even more untouchable opponent than he already was, while also revealing the fact that the president's campaign was funded entirely with stolen money, although Mrs. Danforth herself was apparently unaware of the scams going on. Irons and Derek hide away in the president's beach home, under the protection of their hired help and the Secret Service to boot, hopeful that it will be enough to stop the Beekeeper from reaching them. Agent Parker and her partner, after discovering the connection to Danforth and the scam, relays all the information to their deputy director, correctly assuming that Derek is Clay's next target, to which their boss quickly tells them to do whatever they can to stop Adam Clay. The Beekeeper then invades the president's beach home, taking down everyone in his path to reach and kill Derek Danforth. After the job is done, he quickly takes his leave and jumps out of the window. The film ends with Agent Parker letting him escape into the ocean. It should be noted that the film opens with a credit sequence that tries its best to compare bees to the government, showing how honeycombs are somewhat similarly shaped to the Pentagon. And funnily enough, even including one shot of a beehive in the shape of an American flag. All in the name of showing how similar bees and politics truly are. It's such a ridiculous comparison to make, but I honestly love it for its cartoonishness. Still though, not something I would really put in the positives or negative category, so here it is in observations. Another funny thing here is the fact that Adam Clay is a beekeeper, and an actual beekeeper. Which makes me wonder, are beekeepers required to actually keep bees? Or did Clay here just decide to pick the hobby up during retirement to see what all the fuss was about? Either way, it's a weirdly literal use of an organization's name. It's not like the Navy SEALs are actual SEALs for crying out loud. Okay, I'm already out of neutral things to say. Let's go ahead and jump to the... I honestly don't even know where to start. I guess let's just jump off of the first odd thing that struck me about this film. The sequence where Mrs. Parker is tricked into giving away all of her money. Now, I'm not complaining about the fact that she falls for such an obvious scam. It makes sense for older people to not pick up on all of the red flags in such a situation. And she even states that she's not familiar with computers.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not a computer person. Oh, I have no idea how to do that. My daughter set up everything for me.
But then she goes on to say this.
Everything I have is on the computer.
What could you possibly mean by that? You're an older person who isn't familiar with technology. What is the everything you could possibly be referring to here? But it gets even worse than that, cause she even goes on to say,
Kids, pictures are on this computer.
I literally know they're not. Almost every sequence inside of your house shows a picture frame in the shot. But even better than that, your daughter pulls out a full-blown picture album later, literally going over photos of your children. I refuse to believe that you would have a single picture of your kids saved to your computer, let alone all of them. I don't even understand why they included these lines. It'd still make perfect sense for all the scammers to get her based on the fact she's an older person with little knowledge about how this stuff works. But by including these two lines, you go against what little characterization she had before she kicked the bucket. Speaking of that scene, it makes little sense too. Obviously Adam's holding back here. If he wanted to, he could have easily taken Parker down, but it's the moments leading up to this scene that make no sense. Was Agent Parker already inside of the house when he stepped in? Because if she was, how has she not already spotted her mother's deceased body in the living room? What, was she just stepping around blindly in the dark house without any lights on until Clay entered? Or did she come in after Adam? Because that makes even less sense. How did she supposedly drive up and walk into the house without him noticing? It's like this movie just wanted her to spawn behind Clay at this moment, but didn't consider the fact that it made no sense for her to suddenly pop out of nowhere like this. Also, how does she not already know who Adam Clay is? He's shown to be living with her mother for quite some time up to this point.
This place was crabgrass and weeds, and you brought it back to life.
Judging from that line, at least a few weeks. Most likely a month or two, though. So how did Parker not already know that Clay lived on her mother's land? Yeah, she says she hasn't talked with her mother as often as she liked, but there's a difference in not communicating as often as you should, and not contacting someone for at least a few weeks, or at most a couple of months. You sure picked one heck of a moment to make a visit, that's for sure. But while we're on the topic of Agent Parker, look at how they write her. She's shown to get hungover before work, agitated with suspects, and her partner have light banter between each other. This isn't how FBI agents are usually depicted. It really feels like Agent Parker and her partner were written as the local PD or something, and they just had the FBI sticker slapped on them. It's so obvious that they're only FBI agents because if they were normal police officers, it wouldn't make a lick of sense for them to be guarding the president later in the film. Speaking of the president, her introduction to the film is just the funniest thing ever. Not the character's actual introduction, that's all fine and dandy, but her reveal as president is accompanied with the loudest "Bwom" I've ever heard in my life.
Madam President, Funmi Lawal.
Hello, good to meet you.
It's so hilarious because her previous scenes made it pretty clear already that she was someone of importance, so it's not the biggest surprise in the world that she is the president, but the score sure wants you to think that it's the biggest surprise in the world. Okay, rewinding the film a few minutes, there's something I have to talk about. It's the scene where Clay is interrogating the boss of the call center. He's going over how untouchable the main guy is, and it ends with him showing the boss's picture to Clay. And look at how this is shot. The movie is intentionally not showing the photo to the audience to build suspense, so that when Agent Parker looks at it later, it's shown that Derek is the big boss. Which is something we already knew, so why are you filming it like this? The film wants this to be some sort of reveal, but it's just not because we knew this character was the head of the operation from the very start. The actual big reveal is the fact that he's the son of the president. That raises the stakes quite a bit. But this picture here means nothing. At best, it lets the audience know that Derek is an important guy. But again, his personal bodyguard is the former director of the CIA. We already knew that he was someone of importance. They're shooting this scene here like it's a twist, but it's just not. Another funny thing I noticed is that this film brings up cryptocurrency entirely unironically.
What, crypto? NFTs? You want, I got an NFT. What, no!
Are you, with crypto at all right now? And it's gonna pop, guaranteed. I think they're minting next week.
You do know NFTs are already dead, right? And yes, the Beekeeper is already a few months old, but even when it released, the crypto space had already floundered. It bringing up the topic honestly feels like an old man trying to be hip with the kids by playing with a fidget spinner. Granted, I figure this film went into production when crypto was still booming, so I don't want to hold this against it too much, but still, it's something that you should have cut out when it became obvious NFTs weren't something you should try to save your life with. Speaking of which, why didn't Clay just kill you in the shed with the others? Yeah, remember how Clay let him escape? Only to catch right back up to him on the bridge to kill him right out in the open? Why'd you do that? Were you trying to show off by killing him in a cool way? Because to be fair, it was pretty sick. There's other odd moments like that with Clay as well. Of course, earlier in the film, he blows up the call center, which is great for taking out the scam operation, as long as you don't consider the other legitimate businesses inside of that building that just lost their place of residence.
Tell any of the companies in the building to evacuate now. There's gonna be a fire.
I do hope that all of the people that had nothing to do with the call center whatsoever were able to get out of the building before it exploded.
I don't want to injure anyone who's innocent or not involved.
He talks so much about not wanting to kill innocent people, although he sure doesn't show it with his actions. Look at this scene later where he mercilessly massacres a group of FBI agents in an elevator. He didn't have to do this. He literally sets up the trap and lures them in. This isn't some act of self-defense on his part. He's just killing for the sake of killing. Okay, stepping aside from the one Beekeeper, I want to talk about the Beekeeper organization as a whole for a bit, and how it makes absolutely no sense. First of all, how exactly is this program supposed to work? You'd think it would be like a whole little syndicate of beekeepers on the ground, with several more members working in the office to supply them with information. But that's not really how it's talked about in the film. Adam Clay is retired, and they describe his replacement as the current active beekeeper. And Irons reacts to this by saying this.
The current active beekeeper is a lunatic who should have been removed months ago.
Which all makes it seem like there's only ever one beekeeper on the ground at all times, with a small group of office people behind them. Which just makes no sense. What kind of organization would only have one person on the ground fighting? The movie talks about the beekeepers as if it's some vast group of people fighting for justice, but that seriously clashes with the wording here. Which is it? Are the beekeepers their own form of military away from the government, or are they just some strong person with a network behind them? Second of all, what's the deal with the current active beekeeper? She doesn't even really have an introduction. Heck, it almost feels like the film forgot to shoot an intro scene with her, so they just added some text here on some of the B-roll they had laying around. And during her fight with Adam, she's shown to be a crazy lady, firing a machine gun wildly, which is completely against Adam's more physical form of fighting. Why do both Beekeepers have such different methods of taking someone down? Is there combat training in the Beekeeper program, or is each respective Beekeeper just allowed to use their own preferred method of fighting? Actually, now that I think about it, seeing how Clay killed the current active Beekeeper here, does that mean the program has been taken down as a whole? Because if there was only one person on the ground of all times, the Beekeepers now have no one to fight for them. And third of all, the Beekeeper program is said to be the most classified thing ever, down to the fact that the director of the CIA was included in on it.
There are programs even I wasn't privy to, like the Beekeepers.
But if it's so secretive, then how do so many people know about it? Going back to Irons for a second, I just showed you where he was included in on it at all.
There are programs.
Okay, if that's the case, then when did you find out about it? After you retired? Heck, you know so much about this super secret program that you know who the current active Beekeeper is. Although somehow you didn't know that Clay was already retired.
He's retired from the program.
Well, that changes everything.
But I digress. He's not the only one that's shown to know about the Beekeepers either. The current director of the CIA knows of them, and is shown to be in communication with them as well. And the deputy director of the FBI clearly knows about the Beekeepers too. Look at his expression here when Agent Parker is going over her findings.
Named Beekeeper. A program.
Okay, first of all, very conspicuous. Second of all, how did you come to know of this ultra-secret organization? Were you told about it from someone higher up? Or did you just find out through gathering clues like Agent Parker and her partner here? Yeah, the two of them were perfectly able to stitch together all the information to uncover the Beekeepers flawlessly. Made even easier by the fact that one of them dropped a book on beekeeping during their gas station fight. The Beekeepers leave calling cards! This organization is about as airtight as an open bag of potato chips. Hey, maybe they can't stay that secretive, because they're running on Apple II computers for some reason. Why? Oh, why is this organization gathering all of its data via devices that have less computing power than my Nintendo Game Boy? It's made even more ridiculous in a scene where Clay hooks up a smartphone to the computers to get his next address. These are two pieces of technology separated by 40-something years of technical innovation. There's no way they're compatible with each other. You'd have better luck hooking up a PlayStation 5 to a Sony Watchman. All in all, the Beekeepers organization doesn't make any sense here. It falls flat on its face when you scrutinize it for more than 5 seconds. But the worst aspect of this film isn't the Beekeepers, but with the retired Beekeeper himself, Adam Clay. He is far too overpowered. He always rips through his opponents like they're wet tissue paper, and it's to the detriment of the film. Near the halfway point, he walks right into a group of armed FBI agents, and takes them all down one by one with his bare hands. It's so unrealistic, it's bordering on parody level. You can't have just one guy take down and defeat a dozen armed men, and have the audience take the film seriously from then on out. Even Jason Voorhees would call this unrealistic. It's made even worse near the end of the film with a fight Adam has with this buff Russian man. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention. In the last 20 minutes of the picture, this character shows up. He talks about how he lost a leg killing a beekeeper in the past, and is shown to be eager to kill Clay. Even going as far to say this.
You see him! You get him!
Only for them to later walk up to Clay with his gun. What? This is the one guy there that absolutely would have shot first and asked questions later, but I digress. Getting back to the point, during their fighting scene, Adam is stabbed deep in the gut with a knife, and he literally goes on like it never happened.
You're just a man.
No, he's not! Godzilla has more weaknesses than Clay does. Heck, this Russian guy ain't much better. He's shot in the face, stabbed in the neck, and still goes on fighting until he's eventually killed off. Who are these people? But as I was saying before, this seriously harms the film. Clay is just too overpowered for there to be any suspense about if he's gonna win or not. It also ruins the scene where Agent Parker lets him go. From what we've been shown, she could have unloaded on him right then, and he still would have made it to the ocean. Remember, this scene happens right after he's stabbed in the gut. This is Monty Python, 'Tis But a Scratch, levels of pain tolerance. Actually, now that I think about it, how is she the only one trained on him right now? He just shot the president's son. The Secret Service have already entered the room, but none of them bothered to run to the window he just jumped out of? Are all of them just politely giving him enough time to dip out of sight before they start searching? Ugh. Look, there are a few other minor things wrong with this picture, but I'm getting tired of being so negative. Let's just skip to the... First and foremost, I like how this film acts as a PSA to older people about the dangers of scam calls. Obviously, this picture doesn't depict scammers in the most realistic way, but it does a decent job of showing the dangers they possess. Way too many people fall victims to these types of jerks in real life, and if this film prevented just one person from falling victim to one of these scams, then I can't be too mad at it. Another thing I really like about this film, objectively the best aspect of it, is its action. You get some great fight scenes here between Adam and the rest throughout the picture. Yes, they are horribly unrealistic at times, and the story isn't good enough to be invested in them as a whole, but again, I can't deny how well shot all of the fighting is here. And yeah, it's great seeing Clay take down all of the scammers in his path. Yes, he's pretty brutal to them in some scenes, but they're scammers who've taken from the elderly. It's great to watch them suffer. Alright, I think I've said everything that I wanted to say. Let's wrap things up and get to the... This film's a mess. Its plotline makes no sense if you think about it for more than 2 seconds. But as I mentioned earlier, the action at play is some really solid stuff. Granted, the negatives far outweigh the good here. This is overall a bad movie. If you want to watch a film with some good gory action scenes, there's literally hundreds of other better options to pick from. Oh, and by the way, I know this probably isn't Jason Statham's worst movie by a long shot, but I titled the video this to hopefully get the algorithm to like me. So if you complain about the title of this video in the comments, that just lets me know that you haven't watched to the end. Granted though, I'll still be thankful for it, because YouTube can't tell the difference between positive or negative comments. So it'll still boost my video in the algorithm regardless. So, hypothetical angry commenter, thank you. And thank you for watching all the way to the end. And until next time, goodbye y'all.